Hi there. I love conversation, and I'm sure you do too. It's one of the best gifts in the whole world. It's the thing that we give to each other because we pay attention to each other and we listen. And I think it's just a marvelous thing, and I'm thankful for this opportunity that the story matters, gives us a chance to pay attention and to listen. And so my guest today, my partner in this conversation is Dick Thodal. And Dick, tell us your title and all those kind of good things about you.
Well, my title is Executive Director of Middlebury Community Television.
And that's pretty straight and forward, isn't it? I was thinking about how many different places the two of us have sat and had conversation. And I think of the bench outside the library, the
Uh-huh.
new benches
Uh-huh.
by the town hall. I remember a couple times we sat on the bench in front of the post office,
Uh-huh.
and I think we've been in the park, and so, but mainly we do our talking here up in this studio, and this is the first time we've had a chance to get both of us before the camera.
Yeah.
Usually you're behind the camera.
Oh, I studiously avoid trying to get
I
in front of the camera.
know. It's only because you're so gracious that you,
Well,
yeah, that you were willing to do this. So, but you're surrounded by stories.
That's true.
Just they're all over the place here in 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 the computers and on the shelves. So tell us a little bit about how you got connected to this kind of storytelling.
Well, it could be kind of a long story. If how far back do you want me to go?
As you determine.
Well, okay. When I was a little kid, I was quite a ham. I would love to be in plays and stand up and carry on in all kinds of ways, and I did that. I was in plays when I was in high school, and I was in a band when I was in college, and all that stuff. And then I just kind of went in the other direction, and I became more interested in like other people's stuff. And so when the opportunity came for me to start building on what other people had started as Middlebury Community Television back in 1989, I just started coming in as a volunteer and working on things. And my only professional media experience before I came here was after my freshman year in college. I was a copy boy at the Wall Street Journal, and it was kind of an odd fit for me because I had no interest in business, and I was a hippie. I had long hair and all that, but I was in there, and I remember there was this one guy there in the office who ran Barron's magazine, and it was a one-man band. He just did the whole thing. He sat there, and all these teletypes were running over with his copy, and he went and set the whole thing up. And so this national magazine was really being run by one person, and that sort of impressed me at the time, and I didn't really think much of it till, I mean, I've only really remembered that in the past few years, but I think it did have some influence on me. And so in my younger days, I did all kinds of different things. And I ran into all kinds of people with all kinds of stories, and my sort of experience, and when I finally got through college after the second time, my goal was to be able to build anything I could dream up in my head, and so I was taking courses all over the place, burning up my GI Bill, and I wound up with a BS in biology, and the rest of my family are all engineers, but I think temperamentally that's probably where I am. But when I started off with MCTV, it was just 8 hours a week. I had two other jobs at the same time, and I was just picking up where Lou Majessi had left off. And I remember Lou telling me at the time, he said, now you really understand, don't you, that this is not a place for you to just have fun and you know, do your own thing. I mean, you've got to help other people do it. And that made a lot of sense to me, because I was the one who was being paid and everybody else was a volunteer. So that really stuck with me, that my really, it was not about me and my particular interests. It really was about everybody else. And so, you know, it takes a little discipline to keep repeating that to yourself. But over the years, I've tried to do that, and it's been fascinating to listen to everybody else's stories. They're all over the place.
Yeah, I've heard you use that phrase. It's nice to know where that came from, and that is, it's about other people's stories, and it's about people learning how to tell their stories. And you mentioned some technology in there, early technology, like how he put the magazine together on the teletype. So, what's been your thoughts about how the technology has changed? Then we'll come back to the story part too.
Well, technology, I mean, I've always felt that that we are in a revolution now, and I've sort of been privileged to have been in it, that was really kind of comparable to when the printing press came along. Prior to Gutenberg, literacy was, you would find that really the literacy was in these monks who did these beautiful illuminated manuscripts that were just absolutely beautiful things, but they were really only accessible to a certain number of people. And then when the printing press came along, then all of a sudden literary matter could be spread out to a lot wider population, and and it changed, and that sort of developed literacy among the masses or whatever, and so in I would say in the up till maybe the 70s or something, when people thought about anything visual, like the visual media, it was film, and you had, I mean, things had to be done in you know, in Hollywood or New York or something like that, and so that was sort of comparable to the monks, because it was very expensive and took a lot of experience and training. And then with the as these portable cameras came along in the 70s, and the early ones were really pretty heavy. One of the first, we still got it in the back room, but there was a big shoulder-mounted camera with a porta-pack, and everything, you know, it weighed, you know, maybe 35 or 40 pounds. And that's what you needed to go around and record. And then VHS camcorders came along, and so as the price and availability of this of all this equipment started coming down, more and more people started getting in on it, and so people started buying VHS camcorders to shoot their family footage and all that. And my dad was a great 8mm camera guy, but he was also very cheap, and he knew that it costs an awful lot to process film footage, so he would edit in camera. I mean, he knew that you didn't need to cover the car coming down the hill and coming up in the driveway. You didn't need to shoot the whole thing. He knew that you just shoot it once, then start again, and that was sort of instinctive editing, and that's what you would do in an editing process. But because film was so expensive, you know, it was sort of a shortcut. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of technique and planning and things that you can do to try to make getting media together. I mean, I don't know if efficient is the word, but you can save some time and money by doing it in certain ways. And so that's sort of what's intrigued me about this job, is just trying to find out how people can tell their stories without making turning it into a huge project.
Can you talk a little bit more about your dad and how did he get into media? I mean, that's a pretty savvy thing to know that you.
Well,
how you do that.
I mean, he was a mechanical engineer, and but he and my uncle just they both had cameras, and it was just something that they liked to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he had any. I don't think he had any real driving ambitions to be a filmmaker. He and my mother used to go to Ingmar Bergman movies because they were in Swedish.
Mm-hmm. So did your dad become the kind of the motivating force for you in media, or did you just sort of pick that up from him?
I wouldn't say so. He was, like I say, an engineer, and most engineers, just don't do that much in the arts. It's hard. I mean, there's a lot of crossover between engineering and arts, but I think that things sort of get divided up naturally. But I was always interested in the arts when I was young, from an early age, and so I sort of followed that track by myself.
And you study that, I guess we've had other conversations.
Well, my college was all over the place. I could never make up my mind what my major was. I took courses in just about everything you can imagine, and finally, my degree is in biological sciences, just because I figured, for one thing, is that a good foundation in science is just worth a lot. And I was.
You mentioned one of the basic principles of community television, namely that we do not produce shows for people per se. We try to encourage them to take the equipment and the knowledge. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, it really is because, first of all, if we were to be a production house completely, I mean, we just wouldn't get that much done. I mean, because it takes time to do all these things, and there's a lot going on locally, and that's what our interest is. We're really focused on local programming. That's because there's all kinds of good video and good movies out there, but now you can access all that stuff on the internet. I mean, what really is important is what's really local, and and we let's see, many years ago, but this is probably over 20 years ago now, I was at a meeting with some other public access people, and I remember asking at the time, I said, well, in the future, if everybody has a camcorder and everyone can put stuff up on online, and this was right at the very beginnings of the internet, before we kind of knew we could do this. I mean, what's our purpose? Why are we around? And there was a guy he was from Cambridge Community Television in Massachusetts who said, well, we would be aggregators. And so in a way, I think that even though people can post their own video on YouTube, it doesn't. We can be a place where our virtual place in Middlebury Community Television, where a lot of things that happen are aggregated together, and so you could find your show right next to the select board, which wouldn't happen on YouTube unless you were doing some kind of a search to do that. And the other the other thing, just sort of going back to like who produces what, is we do take responsibility for public meetings like the select board and school board meetings, because that's an important part of our three-part mission, which is public education, government programming. And there are certain issues that really are very important to the community, and usually those things have to do with where your tax money is going. And so with our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the select board and school board meetings, it gives an opportunity for people to find out exactly what someone said in a meeting.
And people talk about that.
Yeah.
In the community, many times in the grocery store,
Yeah.
that's where you have a lot of conversation about the meeting that was had, the select board and the school board and so forth. You and Kurt have, in recent years, have helped us do quite a few things. Can you say something about the ways in which people have been the kind of programs that you've worked on that enable young people and children? And
Well, as you know, we've tried to assess what we do in the community, and we've found that our two strengths are our youth media training and then the government programming that we put on, and those sort of cover two ends, like the bookends of the population. The young kids are getting all this media training that they're going to need in the future, and then older people who are still sort of in a linear TV type mindset get to see what they're interested in, which is like the government meetings. We've had these children's programs for years with different, I've done them, and then we had Jody Bergedick and Nikki and other people, and we've done it over the years. But Kurt has really taken these up to really a great level now, and it's particularly with our collaboration with the Ilsley Library. We used to do these independently, but now, as doing it as a collaboration with the Ilsley, it's just great.
say something more about the collaboration.
Well, when we first came to the library, we were looking for a place to move from the high school, and this was in 1990, and we looked all around, and an opportunity came up with Sally Reed to come up here on the third floor of the library and share the space with the friends. And at that time, the only thing that the library and MCTV had in common was we both had sort of an anti-censorship agenda. The libraries had traditionally, put Lady Chatterley's Lover on the shelf, and public access was public access, and it was really First Amendment television. And so over the years, though, we found that our missions are just converging, because as the libraries get more and more into digital media and the idea of maker spaces and do-it-yourself and all that, we've just found that we're getting closer and closer to being on the same page. So it's been a great collaboration, and we really look forward to a lot more in the future.
Maybe say something about the studio on the second floor, because that's a community project that has really taken hold, I think.
Yeah, well, Kurt is a combination MCTV, Ilsley Library employee, and sometimes it's really hard to understand who he's doing what for at the time, which is part of just what I explained about our missions coming together. But the media lab on the second floor is a way for people to just have the opportunity to take those old VHS tapes and convert them onto a DVD, or just ways to offer people training and skills in media. that they might not be able to get otherwise.
When you've talked to people in the community and they've either become involved with telling their stories on television or they haven't, they've just had conversations. You met some really good storytellers, right?
Oh yeah.
Can you say a little bit about some of those folks that?
Oh boy, there's so many, and you know, to one of my favorites was John Dedham, who he's a Micmac from New Brunswick, who was living around here, and he and his partner at the time, another Sally Reed, Rainbow, would go around all summer. They'd check out VHS cameras, and they'd go out to all of the gatherings and powwows all over the Northeast, and then they'd come in the winter and they'd edit them together, and they did 10 shows, Eastern Woodland Gathering, that were, and John was an incredible guy who kind of grew up in sort of a Stone Age type thing up in New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was out hunting with his father, and he knows so much about what tree root will cure this and that and all that. Very interesting guy, and then he learned how to edit, and so his life kind of spanned all of this technology, just from Stone Age to the present. I mean, he was an interesting example, and he had a lot of stories to tell. But there's all kinds of other people, and I could.
Couple more that come to your mind?
Another at one point. Let's see. This is back in the 90s. There was a library director and his partner, Fred Kerr, who did a comedy talk show, which was it was really sort of it was. And he produced it up here and sent it around to, we sent it around to 26 different access stations in the Northeast, but it was really the first sort of gay comedy show that was making the rounds.
And this was back in?
This was in 1995 or something like that. It was, so it was
when
really kind of cutting.
Issue emerging.
Yeah, it was sort of cutting edge stuff at the time, and it was kind of funny. I don't know. He's moved on to. I think he's on national TV somehow, but.
And I've heard about the pet of the week or.
Yeah, we've had various pet of the week shows that were that were all over the place. And there you can't go wrong with a pet of the week show. We had the Hannaford kids doing it for a while, and they would go out and go down to the Humane Society, and then they tape all the animals, and they did a really nice job on it. And then we had the father of the director do it for a while, and then there were other people. And the last one we had she was a 14-year-old girl who her father would drive her over to the Humane Society. She would take these stills of the different animals and that were up for adoption, and then she'd go home and on her own computer she would put in like graphics and do a narration and add music, and then she posted it on YouTube, and then we would take it down from YouTube and put it on the air, and that was like some of the earliest instances of where we just started, flowing media back and forth from all of these different.
And you've had here a number of programs with very intelligent, very informative presentations on subjects. What are some of the subjects that have been broadcast on MTV?
I've always tried to encourage anyone who wanted to do anything in here, regardless of what their agenda was, that to just let's do it. And so I remember at one time my son's high school history teacher, this was many years ago, said that this was a right-wing station because we had Tom Baer. Tom Baer was one of the first people to do a regular talk show here on MCTV, and Tom was a real natural. He did that, and so over the years we've had our elected representatives. After Tom started doing it, Betty Nuovo now has been doing her show for many years, and so I think that the subject matter, can be all over the place.
Yeah.
We've always encouraged people to think of this as a soapbox, and back in the past, let's see, Jerry Trudeau would come in here and do these Ross Perot type monologues on this or that, and we haven't had as much of that. But the opportunity is always there for anybody who's got a gripe to come in.
The openings are there.
It is there. Yeah, this is First Amendment television.
One of my first introductions to MCTV would have been Betty Moffat and Vibrant Vermonters.
Yeah.
And I caught that one day, and I said, I need to watch this. And I think she got over 250 shows by the time she did that.
And that could be true.
And
we've got them all on VHS back in a
right.
box.
Yeah. Well, anything else that you want to just share as we sit here in this studio before the cameras this time that about the importance of MCTV?
Well, one thing I would like to say is it's been it's been a very interesting job for me, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to do this, and I just hope that that this type of thing stays alive for people, because I think it's really important that people have an opportunity, even though everybody's on YouTube. There's got to be a way to just pull all this stuff together in ways that, and Facebook kind of does that too, and social media. So it may be that this particular type of public access will have lived its life at a certain point, but it'll morph into something else, and really it's community media and access of everyone to this technology. I think that's important.
Well, thank you for that vision, and we'll keep talking, and we'll keep telling stories.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Dick.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Okay.